Good evening. It's now 6 p.m. and the March 18th meeting of the Dublin San Ramon Services District's Board of Directors is called to order. Please join me in the pledge to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Director Johnson?
Here.
Director Von Heater-Leopold?
Here.
Director Govinda Rao?
Here.
Vice President Halkett?
Here.
President Goel?
Present. Thank you. Moving on to item 4, any special announcements or activities?
No special announcements.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, public comment. At this time, those in the audience are encouraged to address the board on any items of interest that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and not already included on tonight's agenda. Comments should not exceed 5 minutes. Are there any speaker cards or members of the public that wish to address this board? Thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 6, agenda management.
No recommended changes.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7, consent calendar. Matters listed under this item are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless requested by a member of the board or the public prior to the time of the board votes on the motion to adopt. Do I have a motion to approve the items under the consent?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, I got a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstention? Motion carries unanimous. Moving on to item 8, board business. Item 8A, receive updates on per and polyfluoroalkyl. I most probably messed that up, so staff, please correct me. PFAS in water and wastewater. Before I turn this over to staff, I'd like to make a recommendation. There's going to be 3 substantially lengthy presentations. One, I'd like to request that we allow the presentation to complete in its entirety, and at the end of each presentation, we would be given an opportunity to interact and ask questions. At the end of the 3rd presentation, there'll be a conclusion that I'm going to request the general manager please provide for us. At that point, we will be able to then move to public comment and then bring it back to the board for discussion. Is everyone okay with that kind of a format?
Agree.
With that, I'll gladly turn it over to staff for a staff memo.
Good evening, President Goel and members of the board. The district has a strategic plan goal to meet or exceed regulatory requirements while preparing for the future regulatory landscape. Over the last few years, there has been increased attention on a large group of man-made chemicals referred to as per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, which have been detected at low levels in the Tri-Valley's groundwater supplies and wastewater. Consistent with our mission and strategic plan goal, the district is collaborating with other agencies, such as Zone 7 Water Agency, to study and address the public health and environmental risks associated with PFAS. This evening, the board will receive 3 informational presentations on regional and local efforts related to PFAS in water and wastewater. Kicking us off this evening will be a presentation by Zone 7 Water Agency. Tonight we are pleased to have with us the General Manager, Valerie Pryor, and Ken Min, Water Resources Manager. Zone 7 is the wholesale water agency for the Tri-Valley and responsible for managing the local groundwater basin. The district purchases 100% of its drinking water from Zone 7, which is typically a blend of surface water and groundwater. Zone 7 has been at the forefront of addressing PFAS in groundwater. Ken Min will be providing an update on Zone 7's PFAS management strategy and actions Zone 7 has taken to deliver PFAS-free drinking water to the community. I'll turn it over to Ken now.
Thank you, General Manager Jen Lee, and good evening to President Goel and member of the board. It is my pleasure and privilege to be here today to present what we have been doing on this important water quality challenge that we have faced in our current lifetime. It is very important. So with that, what I'd like to go through is how Zone 7 is managing this PFAS contamination issues in our groundwater basin. And along the way, you will have a chance to know why it is important for us, why we care about this, and what are the impacts and the action that we have taken and next step we are going forward with this. So first, I'd like to introduce you what PFAS is all about and why do we manage and what is our strategy, along with what we have accomplished so far. And finally, I will leave you with key takeaways and plan next step. So about PFAS, it is hard to pronounce, but normally commonly referred to as, I share that with you, President Goel, it's hard. So commonly referred to as PFAS, and there are different compounds under this category of PFAS, particularly PFOS and P4, you will see along the way. And it works, the PFAS were accidentally discovered in DuPont lab and back in 1938. And they went into the manufacturing of 1940s. And currently there are more than 14,000 known compounds. Those are little siblings of the PFAS under PFAS umbrella. So PFAS is made out of fluorine, oxygen, hydrogens, and carbon atoms. I will tell you why it is important. So basically, this is anthropogenic compound, which is man-made in the lab, and it consists of 8 carbon atoms, shown in black, and the fluorines in green. Why am I showing this? This is the original makeup of the PFAS compound. Is also known as long chain. It is a long chain because it has a long carbon atoms in it. That will make sense when I go through it. So as it made in lab under certain condition, the bond between the fluorine and carbon is very strong. It is indestructible, that strong. It never degrades, and that's why it was referred to as forever chemicals. And it is highly mobile in water. If you look at the compound itself, you see hydrogens and oxygens, very similar to water. And since 1940, this product has been, or this compound has been put to use in different consumer products. And as you can see, it's used from nail polish to dental floss to pesticides to fast food packaging containers and Gore-Tex clothing, all of that. So essentially, the PFAS is everywhere. Everything you touch is most likely you will be touching the product with the PFAS in it. Unfortunately, recently discovered that the PFAS compound has a negative effect to human health and especially living organism. So when they realized that, we have to do something about it. And manufacturers recently, well, this was produced in 1940s, but only 10 years ago, they stopped producing the long chain. So that's why I was showing you that this compound, now they use the short chain, they cut up in half, so now they have a 4 carbon atom as opposed to 8, but still similar effect. It is not still going away from the product we use every day entirely. That means something to your main line of business, because when you're receiving all these influence, those will be laced with the PFAS compound. So why do we manage it as Zone 7 and water agencies? Well, we do live by our mission, and we do have to support delivering safe, reliable, efficient, and sustainable water. Each those words means a lot to us. Those are our creed that we live by. So when we deliver the wholesale water to you, we like to make sure that the water that we deliver meet or exceed all the water quality standards very effectively. In addition to that, we also need to follow our policy guidance, like water quality policy, water reliability policy, all of the policy, the internal policy we have to meet. and regulatory compliance, needless to say, state and federal regulatory compliance. And number 3 is very near and dear to me. I manage the groundwater resources for Zone 7 Water Agency, where when it's come to second, third, fourth year of the drought, our groundwater basin is our safety net. It is our asset. It is our basically, crutch when we are in a very difficult situation. So if PFAS render the groundwater basin unusable, you can imagine the impact that we will have for this economy and the community of the Tri-Valley. That's why we care. And finally, we have to meet or exceed state and federal water quality standards. And we are the GSA, Groundwater Sustainability Agency. We are legally required to manage the groundwater quality of the groundwater basin. Those are the 5 reasons that we are actively managing the PFAS. So how did we get here? Well, it's all started in 2018. And Zone 7 being proactive, we started sampling the PFAS in our drinking water way before regulatory mandate. We started in 2018, November, December timeframe. Actual mandate was imposed in 2019, April or so. We are ahead of the game. We are start sampling it. Then drought hits. And then we did a PFAS source investigation study where we hired a consultant to investigate whether potential sources or source would be. We did that. And follow up to that, we did a mobilization study. You will see some of the results in the following slides. So we identify the potential sources. We analyze the mobilization study using computer models. And lo and behold, after that, we developed the PFAS management strategy internally. So right after that we implemented or we developed the strategy, State Water Resource Control Board issue the advisory level for PFHHS. That is where basically everything went south. Because one of our most productive well, which responsible for 16% of our production, water quality exceeded PFHHS standards when we sampled it. So being a responsible and very conscientious agency, we shut down their wells. So you can imagine we are at the third year of the drought. One of the most productive well become unusable. And it was such a great challenge that staff have to deal with to make sure that we meet all your demands when you need it. Then within 12 months, actually about 10 and 11 months, we were able to conceptualize, design, construct, put into operation the first of the Northern California first PFAS management treatment facility, Stone Ridge PFAS treatment facility, within like 11 months. We did that through the drought emergency order and design build, and we are fortuitous to have the vessel available. We capitalized on that. We implemented that very efficiently within 11 months. And then we are not stopping there. Additionally, we drill a sentinel well because we like to protect the clean well field, which is Hope Yard well field, not very far from here. So in order for us to do that, we put in a sentinel well to alert us if there is any migration to the west. We did that. And 2024, I'm going to go through a little bit of chronological event later on, but 2024, the MCL was developed by EPA. So we started a regional project to diversify the groundwater supplies. And currently, we are completing our second PFAS treatment facility. Maybe some of you or all of you may be attending our ribbon cutting ceremony in a couple of weeks. That is our second treatment facility. So just going through the timeline so that you know where Zone 7 stands and what our proactive actions are. They promulgated the MCL in April 2024, and it gives 3 years just to monitor. EPA said, you have 3 years to start monitoring your water resources. And like I said, we are way ahead of it. We already started monitoring in 2018. And the EPA said, you have to inform the public in 3 years from 2024. We've been informing public since 2018. And it's that you have to implement solution and develop the treatment system or protocol in 2029, 5 years from 2024. As I noted, Zone 7 is ahead of it. We are already supplying the PFAS safe water to all our retailers. So that is how regulatory environment currently is. And if you look at the MCL, I want you to focus on the green labels, numbers here. Those are the MCL, the PFOA, PFOS are 4 parts per trillion. And EPA regulates 6 PFAS compound with the one outstanding category, which is a hazard index, under which they lump several PFAS compound under the one criteria. But for us, it's our region, we have to meet PFOS at 4 parts per trillion and PFOA 4 parts per trillion. So like I said, it's about more than 14,000 PFAS compound currently in circulation. So I think EPA goals and strategy is to increase the regulatory compliance needs on other remaining compounds under that health index, hazard index type of approach. That's what they are doing. So we will see more of the regulation than less. And the regional board has its own, its own the environmental screening level. State Water Resources Board has that level. Currently, if we meet like 40 parts per trillion for PFOS, legally speaking, we are okay, right? Because it is currently MCL is not effective, but actual MCL is a tenth of that state regulatory standards. And I'm proud to say that we are meeting that 4 parts per trillion as we speak today. So what is 4 parts per trillion looks like? So this is Olympic-sized swimming pool, which is about 25 yards wide and about 50 yards long and about 8 foot deep, which equivalent to half the size of a football field. So each football field has you can put 2 Olympic-sized swimming pool in one football field. So you need about 20 Olympic-sized swimming pool, which is about 10 football field, 8 foot deep. All you have to do is you have to drop 4 droplets of the PFAS in it. That is what 4 parts per trillion looks like. So again, we are meeting it by treating it, but that also show the potency of this PFAS compound for the health and human consumption. So what is our strategy? What is Zone 7 strategy? So our strategy has components in it. Starting with the monitoring, which is the basic foundation of the strategy, because we have to understand the situation before we can do anything with it. So then monitoring is to track and manage groundwater quality, followed by, nested by the blending and treating. We're gonna blend, we're gonna treat to make sure that we meet the standards. And that's not end of it. We just can't stop there. We have to manage the concentration as much as possible, mechanically as well as hydraulically, to make sure that we can prevent further degradation or contain the current situation as what it is. And finally, we are not stopping there. We have to diversify our water supply sources, groundwater or otherwise, to make sure that we have reliable supplies for all our retailers and their economy. So monitoring component, I'm going to go through a little bit that we have done. For example, this is the evidence of how Zone 7 has been undertaking this task. In 2021, we have 67 wells we are tracking. Right now, we are more than 100 wells. That is almost like 45% increase. And we are also putting the Sentinel wells and implementing program to understand that the PFAS situation. You don't have to read everything, and this just kind of a shotgun shot type of a picture show you how pervasive our monitoring well networks are. We have more than 236 monitoring wells all across the main basin as well as French area, including your town as well. So we cover all across the valley. and of which these are the production well that we have, those blue and green and purple magenta dots. And you can see the other Pleasanton well as well. The Stone Ridge is the red, which is one of the workhorse well for us. So this is what we have in the monitoring program as it goes up. Those lighted little blues are PFAS sampling points in 2021, and that was increased by the reds in 2023. So we invest a lot of capital in this monitoring program because it's worth it. It gives us information for us to manage the PFAS. So when you use those monitoring data, when you see the results, this is a delineation of the PFAS footprint back in 2021. So as you can see, the stronger the color, the stronger the concentration. This is for the upper aquifer unit. If you are familiar with our basin, we have an upper and lower, like upstairs and downstairs. You have upper and lower. Our production wells are perforated mostly in the lower aquifer units. That's a municipal production zone. So what you are seeing is the units closer to the surface. So this is important because all the hydrology, all the air recharge, all the local surface runoff precipitate into the groundwater, then you will see the higher concentration. And I have to note that even the rainwater has the PFOS in it. The rainwater has PFOS in it, and most of the Americans, the blood serum has PFAS in it. So that is how pervasive PFAS is, and it's also bioaccumulating. So it's accumulated internally in compound. So it's not surprising to see when you have arroyo running through, if you have a surface runoff and other industries, that we see the footprint just like this. So 2023, you can see this become more elongated and more widespread. Don't be alarmed. It is not because all of a sudden over a year PFAS discharges increase, not that. Like I showed you in previous slides, we increase the monitoring. So when you monitor more location, then you detect more. So that is one of the key reminder for listening publics or all the media, is that what we are presenting is we are very transparent, factual, and very open about what we learn. So we are sharing that with all the parties. That's why it look larger than before. So here's the thing. This is 2021 footprint delineation for lower aquifer units. This is how it looks like. And as you can see, the Hobart well field is totally protected and clean. And other places, green and orange and magenta, those are in the PFAS footprint. So those are the two locations currently we are building, and we are contemplating starting the feasibility of putting one in Mocho well field represented by AMS. So this is a 2023 footprint. So what we are doing is that we are blending and treating. So there are no single solution for PFAS problem or management. We have to have all of the above approach. So what we are doing is that we completed the Stone Ridge facility. So we are currently operating that. And we optimize blending and treating. What does it mean? So our water supply portfolio consists of surface water, groundwater. Last 2 years or so, most of the water we deliver to our customer, our retailers, are mostly a surface water. So we manage our groundwater in a way that we blend it or we use it as we need it. But predominantly, we are using different sources to make sure that we are delivering the safe water. So having said that, blending and treating is currently meeting water quality standards and continue to meet the MCL. So what we are doing with the wellhead treatment is that this is a map you may recognize, El Charro and the Stone Ridge. So here's a Stone Ridge PFAS treatment facility. This is our first facility, and we are building the chain legs, and we're going to do the ribbon cutting ceremony in a couple of weeks, and it will become operational. We just went through Division of Drinking Water inspection, and we are very optimistic that we will get the approval very soon. And this is the Mocho well field, and that is where the MG Mocho demineralization plant is. So this is Santa Rita and Stone Ridge, that corner. So we are currently studying feasibility of putting one in, and you will see why that is important as well. So this was, we started about a year and a half ago. We started building a Stone Ridge facility. These are the vessel delivery a few months ago. And currently we are almost ready to do the ribbon cutting in these couple of weeks. So you may ask, what does those PFAS vessel do? And does it make real effective treatment process? So that's the reason I like to show this graph to you. Unfortunately, this thing died. Oh, here you go. I was upside down. What a genius. So this graphic shows the data trends for PFHXS, and that I want you to pay attention to the yellow line, California response level, which is 20 parts per trillion, and this is the EPA MCL 10 parts per trillion, is the orange line. So when we hit this thing doesn't work too well. When we hit the 2022 Q1 or so, as you can see, the blue dots went above the yellow line, CA response level. That is when we shut it down and we built that Stone Ridge facility right away. So you can see all of these going up, depends on the hydrology and as well as the pumping scenario is now coming down. But having the treatment facility is that if you put the treatment facility, I want you to pay attention to the last 3 points of the blue graph. So if you look at it, that's sort of like water coming out of the well. So we run it through those vessels with this media in it. And what it does is bring it down to 2 parts per trillion. So it was somewhere around 20, maybe 24, 26 parts per trillion to 2 parts per trillion. But I will argue that because I'm a proponent of the project, so I would say actual concentration of PFAS is almost next to nothing. Then why are we reporting 2? That is a method detection limit. The lab can certify only to the 2 parts per trillion, so they certify as such. But actually, our treatment process is so effective that we believe, we took the PFAS out of the water and we provide the customer the safe water. Same thing with the PFOS trend. If you look at the blue dots, you will see it's going up to almost above 30 sometime and somewhere around 25, 26. That's water from the well. You run through the vessel, then boom, come out of the other side is a PFAS safe water. So that's why that we invest what we invest in. The Stone Ridge itself costs about $12 million, and Channel Lakes is about twice as much. So we are investing in it for good reason. So what is groundwater managing water quality component looks like? So managing groundwater quality consists of basically diluting it or operating the facility. That's one way. The ongoing basics we're gonna do to the extent possible. We like to manage the plume or water quality, footprint in a way that we can prevent the further degradation or mobilization. That's what we're trying to do. I'd like to demonstrate what that looks like. So, those contours are showing the groundwater flow gradient. The arrows are showing this way or that way where the groundwater is flowing. As you can see, those circles are representing different well field. So, for example, this green blob represent the Stone Ridge well conal influence. So when you pump the Stone Ridge well, that is about the area that the well gonna suck the water into, right? So that is one location. If you look at the Channel Lake wells, we have 3 of them sucking the water from the same location. You can see a bigger blob. And this is the Mocho well field. We have 3 wells running. So this is how much the well influenced the water around that well location. So if we do extracting that water and treating it, we are affecting that much amount of water by extracting and treating it. So that's why those facilities that we triangulated, we put it in there makes sense because it has, if we operate them, not only treat the PFAS concentration in the water, it's also impacting the hydraulic gradient when we are lowering the hydraulic head there. So that is our way of saying, or our way of managing the mobilization to the extent possible. So that is what we are trying to do. So what does it look like in terms of the mobilization itself? So before we develop, if you recall, I showed the timeline where I said, well, this is where we develop the mobilization study. This is where we do the strategy. So we don't do those strategy recklessly. We try to understand the sources, trying to understand the mobilization pattern. That way that we can effectively design a strategy around it. So if you are lucky, you will see it, but looks like it's not helping me. Yeah, there's an animation to it. I won't waste any more time of your time, but basically it will show essentially it's going to shrink or truncate it over 20 years period of time. Oh, here you go. Here you go. So that shows how it would react to it. This is a upper aquifer unit with those pump and treat scheme. So if you look at the lower aquifer unit, you will see the similar reaction to it. Again, this is not absolute, but it just tells us that the possibility or trend that it would exhibit over 20 years time. So the last thing I'd like to tell you is the diversification. It is essentially important for us. Either it is, you all are well versed in financial sector. I'm sure, one thing I learned in my school is that diversify when you come to investment also, right? So same thing here. Zone 7 is diversifying our water supply sources so that if one goes out, we can make up with other one. So we are trying to diversify that. We recently recharged the groundwater basin to 100% full, 101% to be accurate. But I think we have the basin fully recover in last 3 years. That is how actively we manage the groundwater basin to make sure that we make up for what we draw down in 2022, 2021. So we are now 100%. We are sitting on 100% full groundwater basin. What that means is should drought comes in coming years, we cover Zone 7, Tri-Valley's demand. We will be able to meet that. Those become really important when it's come to issuing bonds. The rating agency like to make sure that we have enough water supply. So we look at that, and we're gonna be updating the well master plan to revisit all the current wells that we have, what need to be replaced, what need to be diversified, all of that. And we are conducting a feasibility study to understand the local storage and convenience project using our gravel pit as a surface storage, facility. And we are doing evaluation to diversify the regional potential as well. And that is what we are doing. So what are the key takeaways and next step? So the first and foremost, this is extremely important. The PFAS is ubiquitous. Like I said, it's in the blood serum, it's in the rainwater, it's in the consumer product, roof tiles, carpet, anywhere. So if a product is that pervasive and ubiquitous, how are you going to remove that? What is the source then? Yes, there are spill here, there's a fire station here, or fire event here. Yes, you can point to 1, 2, 3, and 4. So our belief is, our position is that we will not be able to remove all the PFAS in the environment entirely. That is almost next to impossible. So we have to work with what we have. So it could come from legal legacy sources from 1940, 60, or even today, the product that we are using. And like I said, it's not impossible. The increased monitoring, like I show you with the graph, is going to exhibit more of it. So please, when you read news article or any of those, make sure please be discerning to understand what the information is. And sometimes, when you shine light on some object, you will see more details. That is what it is going on. And we are recharging, we are pumping and treating, as we show you. And when we have a wet hydrology, major runoff or precipitation event, it changes the footprint. So that's why we use the footprint. It is not a plume because plume has a different connotation to it. It's associated with the liquid or substance which is heavier or lighter than water. The PFAS, like I explained to you, it is water. It's moved with water, it's dispersed with water, so it's very fluid. No pun intended. It's really so. Having said that, although that we lay out the strategy, we show you the step, we know what we're doing. Ultimately, that we are planning for the time that we may need to treat all the well fields, because currently we are managing the 6 regulated compounds. Like I alluded to you earlier, there are another 14,000 plus still remain. As time goes by, if regulatory environment got tighter, if EPA issue more regulatory compliant needs, what are we going to do? We have to do the treatment. So we are anticipating, we are financially planning, we are logically planning what could come in coming years. But our job is to make sure that we invest only when it's the best, most appropriate time to invest. But in our thought process, we already start thinking about what would be needed down the line. And again, this is, I cannot emphasize enough, all that posting or social media or the newspaper, all of that, some of those are sound bites. So I want you to be aware of it as well. When you come across something, I want you to discern and make sure that what the real information behind it. But yeah, very sensational topic. So factual information is essential. That's why the Zone 7 is committed to be transparent and share the information with the number one, starting with all the retailers along with the public. We are actively engaging in that information campaign. And also, I like to understand, go home with the peace of mind, knowing that yes, PFAS in our groundwater basin, PFAS everywhere, PFAS in our lipstick and dental floss. The water that Zone 7 put into the distribution system, at the point of compliance, we meet not only the current state standards, we already meet the MCO, which is mandated in 5 years from today. So you can drink up. So our plan next step is we will continue monitor, we will continue coordinate with the regional board, drinking water, and we are currently developing the groundwater models, updating models. When it's become available, we're going to rerun those mobilization studies to get a better understanding of it. And we are finishing the Channel Lake PFAS treatment facility as we speak. We're going to pursue the regional project feasibility to diversify the source. And we're going to develop, this is a new for our agency, we're going to do basin-wide water quality management plan. Is part of the strategic goal that we set to make sure that we understand and manage the current and future water quality challenges. And we're going to update the master plan, and we are studying the MOCHO, and all of these facility completed, we're going to run those facilities to manage the water quality. So that is what we have been doing. And now that I got this opportunity, I'd like to take this opportunity to credit your staff, starting with the general manager, Jen, and all the staff, Steve, everybody else, to collaborating with us. And particularly when we are seeking the grant funding from DWR, I call up Jen and say, hey, Jen, I need your support. I need your letters that, strongly recommending the state of California to grant us funding so that we don't have to levy on the customers and the retailer like you. We try to make sure we are very conscientious about that burden. So we like to make sure we can get all the grant fundings, and Jen supported it. And with Jen's, along with other supporter, we were able to secure $16 million of the federal. That is one of the largest grant funding that Department of Water Resources ever dispensed to a single entity. So we were able to accomplish that, and that is how much money that you save. And then we continue the information sharing with the DSRSD, and we have very open and transparent communication between two agencies. And we continue to monitor and data sharing, and we are also exploring opportunity to collaborate on updating the portable reuse study, which become outdated, which was 7 years old. So we are considering the updating that study. And that is as a result of the last Tri-Valley Liaison Committee meetings where committee directed staff to consider and update the study. So we are continuing with that. And when we diversify, when I say diversification, it's not only surface water, groundwater, or stormwater or bank water, it's also that purified water is part of the consideration as well. So that's what we are doing. So with that, I thank all of you and more than happy to answer any question that you may have.
All right, I'll bring it back to the board here. I'll go ahead and start on my right side if you have any questions. Any questions?
Just a quick question. You were mentioning about the 4-chain and the 8-chain, how, the structure of it that's moved from the 8-chain to 4-chain. So is the 4-chain a little more unstable? Is that why they've moved towards that, where it may break down easier, or just curious?
My honest opinion is same as strong as long chain. The short chain as long as long chain. But when long chain become notorious and become recognized, what they were doing is that, well, is this chain, long chain is causing problem, how about half of it? Fluorine carbon bond, like I show you, made in lab, doesn't break down whether it's a short or long. That the carbon fluorine bond is so strong. Let me give you one example. When we run those media, when we use media to extract the PFAS out of the water, when it is spent, meaning this totally coated with PFAS, one way of destroying this is incineration. It's almost like they need a kiln type of a device to put this spent media in it and heat up to 2,000 Fahrenheit. So, you can wrap your mind around it. Yeah. So that is how strong this is. And scientists are still wondering whether that incineration totally destroy it or change in element form from solid to vapor or vapor to gas. They are still, I don't even want to know faith of it, but that's how strong it is. So between short and long chain, it's just a marketing, I think, strategy, I would say. I can use them more strong words, but I think I will leave it at that.
Great, thank you. And then the other thing, if I heard right, the grant support that you were mentioning, it's $16 million that was given? Okay, great, thank you. That's all I have.
One question, one comment. Your magic resin,
Yes.
does that take care of all 14,000 compounds, or is it only designed for the ones that are already on the chart?
So it's a very great question. That's a great question. So before we select this resin, we take 55-gallon barrels of our water, groundwater, and send it to ASU. And then we do the rapid column testing and try different resin and which one can take out the PFAS. So this resin works well with our water, which is PFOS rich.
Got it.
But if you look at let's say, East Coast or New York or Midwest, Chicago, they are predominantly have the Gen X type of compound, which is different from the PFOS compound. So they may need different type of resin. But manufacturers are able to design different resin for different compound.
So if they start adding to that list, we can get the resin mix correct to hopefully take care.
Another great question. I will tell you why I'm excited about this, because if you notice our vessel train, you will see the Stone Ridge has 6 vessel train. That and the Channel Lakes had, I forgot how many, but it's about 18 of them, quite 3 times as much. On top of that, our design leave a little bit of pad, concrete pad, just in case we need to add more vessels with a different resin to take out different things.
Good.
So when we built it, we have we thought through potentials. So yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So if the other compound comes online and we have to treat it, we add more vessels and put in resin to it, and it is resin to it, and it is cheaper because we already have the facilities already.
Got it. And that actually is a great segue to my comment. I, for one, and I think I can speak for the board, really appreciate, one, the leadership that the zone has taken on this, the collaboration that we're doing together. This would be a heck of a lot harder if we're working across purposes and pointing fingers. So I want to applaud you, your staff, your board, our staff, our board for pulling that off. That's excellent. And not want to sound like the old guy, but 20 years ago that wouldn't have happened. Our agencies didn't work well together 20 years ago, but it's taken a lot of work, a lot of staff spade work, a lot of board spade work. I feel like we're in a really good spot here as far as working together and solving what's a totally unplanned, totally not our fault problem that we have to figure out just because that's what we have to do. So I appreciate you guys.
Start with the leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to echo what Rich said. He mentioned that 20 years ago this wouldn't have happened. I think it's amazing where we've come in 20 years to be working together. We should be working together, and we didn't for a long time. So I'd like to thank everybody. I know your board's worked, your staff's definitely worked on it, and so have we, but this is great. Thank you very much.
Well, I think those are great comments. I think a couple of things about your presentation. First of all, very thorough. I appreciate that because I think what it does is it helps inform people truly on what is the information that we're aware of, putting it out there, and helping them understand best from a factual context. I mean, a couple of things that resonated with me throughout your presentation. I guarantee you this one's going to keep on repeating in my head. 4 parts per trillion. 1 drop, 1 part per trillion in 20 pools, equivalent to 10 football fields 8 feet deep. Talk about a picture. And just think about what the size of a drop is and look it straight down the line and see if you can see the end of that. That talks a little bit about the magnitude, right? When you were kind of giving your presentation, these are some things, are my takeaways, is proactive, methodical, transparent approach to addressing a problem and controlling mobilization. Mobilization is expanding that footprint or the spread. And if you kind of think of it as a cone that keeps on going deep to the center, whereas where we're pulling the water from, it's essentially pulling it into the center. And then amazing job on getting 16 million, the highest amount given to one entity to help our citizens here addressing it proactively and keeping their costs down and their water as well managed within the spectrum of guidelines. Thank you for your presentation.
President Will.
Thank you, Ken. Moving on, for the second presentation, I'd like to introduce Christy Fournier, the district's Laboratory and Environmental Compliance Manager. Christy will provide an update on PFAS in wastewater, including how PFAS gets into wastewater and ongoing studies to better understand the presence of PFAS in wastewater. Christy.
Good evening, President Goel and members of the board. My name is Christy Fournier. I'm the Laboratory and Environmental Compliance Manager. In the trio of presentations, my main focus is going to be about wastewater, specifically the San Francisco Bay regional study conducted by Bay Area Clean Water Agencies and the scientists at San Francisco Estuary Institute. So today, Ken gave an excellent, detailed presentation on what PFAS is. So I am going to give a very high level, and we're going to get to the points. Then I'm going to talk about how PFAS gets into the wastewater, our wastewater treatment facilities, because it's really important for you to understand what our streams are and how PFAS can travel through the plant and where it ends up. Then I'll delve into the San Francisco Bay Regional Study. I'll go over some of the legislative efforts that we're interested in that is going to help get PFAS out of consumer products. I'll go over the next steps for DSRSD. And then I'm going to leave you with a picture, the final takeaway, the final message that I'd like you to have at the end of this presentation. So where can you find PFAS? Just look up on the screen. It's in many of the products that we interact with on a day-to-day basis that are here in this very room, maybe on our bodies. So that's why consumer products are so important, because they're widely used. They've been used for a long time, since the 1940s, and these applications to make things heat resistant, water resistant, stain resistant, and they brought modern convenience. They brought the convenience of modern convenience. However, they do create complex environmental issues for us to solve, and that have health implications. So, why am I talking about consumer products? Because for the routes of exposure, it's one of the sources of routes of exposure. Our wastewater treatment plant is part of the waste infrastructure and sits in the middle of this diagram. Wastewater agencies are passive receivers of PFAS. Sources of PFAS can be from consumer products, from residential, commercial, and businesses, and from industrial users that are permitted for their processes that they have on site. And since wastewater agencies' conventional treatment doesn't create nor destroy PFAS, it'll go back out into the environment. So let's go over the DSRSD wastewater treatment facilities that I'm sure you're very, very well aware of and well versed in. Our treatment facility lies east of the 680 and south of the 580 here in this picture. We have the main wastewater treatment plant where the solids and liquids are separated. We have our recycled water treatment facility just north of that. And then across Stone Ridge, we have our facultative sludge lagoons where the biosolids are digested for 4 to 5 years. And then we have our dedicated land disposal site, which is a land treatment unit, a permitted land treatment unit where the biosolids are injected into the ground. And we also have 14 monitoring wells on site to monitor the impact of our operations. So we're going to go over the pathways. The first pathway we're going to go over is a liquid stream. It's the stream that goes out to the bay. We have wastewater that comes in through our sewer system to our main wastewater treatment plant. And the liquids and solids are separated. The liquids are treated down to below our permitted levels for discharge in the San Francisco Bay. It's sent to a location for our joint power authority. It's combined with the city of Livermore's treated effluent. And then it goes over to the San Francisco Bay where it's discharged via a deep water discharge permit. The second stream we'll talk about is the recycled water pathway. So we have the wastewater stream coming into the plant, and then the liquids and solids being separated, the liquids treated down below our permitted levels. And then it goes for further treatment at the recycled water treatment plant, where it's treated further to meet the requirements to be able to be applied to landscaping and fields. It's sent out to our recycled water customers, and then now we'll go over the solids path. Again, wastewater comes into the plant, solids and liquids are separated. The solids go into the digesters and are treated in our digesters at our main wastewater treatment plant. Then they move underground to the facultative sludge lagoons, where they're further digested for about 4 to 5 years. Once they're digested, we have to go through rigorous testing before they can be applied to the land. Once they pass that testing, they go on to the dedicated land disposal site, our land treatment unit. and that is the solids pathway. So I've given you 3 different pathways. Now we are ready to go into the San Francisco Bay Regional PFAS study. All right, before we go in, I just am going to give you a brief background on PFAS class versus compound, which will build up to the methods. And then Ken did such a great job with the unit of measurement, so I'm going to fly through that real quick. So when we talk about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, we're talking about a class of compounds. That means there's a structural requirement there, and if it meets the structural requirement, then it is considered a compound within the class. So an example of that would be our perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, which is PFOS, which Ken's presentation goes over quite in depth, and the next presentation will go over as well. And that is a single compound out of the over 14,000 compounds of PFAS as EPA defines it. So imagine 14,000 little orange circles in that blue circle, and then you can kind of think about the world of PFAS. Now let's go over the analytical methods, because these two link up. So how do we detect PFAS? How do we know how much there is? That's all in the analytical method. You have your world of PFAS existing in the blue circle. You have a compound, a single compound there represented by the orange circle. You have different methods that you can apply. In this particular study that we're going to go over, I'm going to highlight only 2 methods that were used. We have a targeted method. A targeted method means that I know I'm looking for this structure, and I want to see whether I can see it, and then how much I see of it. And that's what a targeted method is. This particular targeted method that was used for the study looked at 40 different compounds. So it was looking at just 40 different PFAS compounds out of the over 14,000 that exist. The other method that was applied was a broad spectrum method. So for the study, the total oxidizable precursor assay was used, and I know it's jargony, so I'm going to try to break it down as best I can. But what that means is that prior to ionizing with the targeted method analysis, the sample was oxidized under aggressive conditions that forced a structural change. And that structural change forced it to an endpoint that can be detected by the targeted method. And the reason why that's important is because TOC gives a better estimate of all PFAS in the sample because it can capture the PFAS precursors. And what I mean by PFAS precursors are the PFAS, some of them are PFAS, and they end up transforming to the targeted compounds. So before they are able to transform to the targeted compounds, they're considered precursors. They're still considered PFAS. I hope that all made sense, clear as mud. Okay. I'm going to go over unit of measure. Ken did a great job, but I want to show you the difference. And the reason why I want to show you the difference is because it's all going to make sense in the end. So 1 milligram per liter is 1 part per million. That's 1 cup of water in a swimming pool. You have 1 part per billion, which is even a smaller amount. 1 microgram per liter, which is 1 drop of water in a swimming pool. And then you have the 1 nanogram per liter, or the 1 part per trillion, which is 1 drop of water in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So just to give you the scope of the different size, for this study, we're looking in the parts per trillion for PFAS. So the San Francisco Bay Region study was a multi-phase regional study put on by the Bay Area Clean Water Agencies and the San Francisco Estuary Institute. I'm going to start with the key takeaways. So here are the key takeaways of this particular study. Using the broad spectrum method instead of just using a targeted method showed that there were significant level of PFAS precursors coming into the plant. So you wouldn't have been able to detect that with just using the targeted method. And that's important because it plays into wastewater treatment plants are not creating nor destroying PFAS in their treatment processes. There's some transformation going on from precursor to targeted analytes. And also the regional study found that residential wastewater is a major source of PFAS for the Bay Area wastewater agencies. So those are the key takeaways. Let's delve into the background of why this study was conducted. The study was conducted in 2020 because there was an investigative order issued to all wastewater treatment plants that discharged over 1 million gallons a day. And it ordered plants to look at PFAS in their influent, what was coming into the plant, their affluent, the liquid stream leaving the plant, their biosolids, the solid stream, and also any monitoring wells if they were permitted to do monitoring. The other thing to note is that Region 2 was exempted from the study, and that's the San Francisco Bay Area region. And the reason why it was exempted from the study is that that area discharges into the San Francisco Bay, which is not a source of drinking water. Instead, the San Francisco Bay Area region decided to further the science and pursue this study. So in 2020, in late 2020, the study started. In 2021, the study was completed. And it called for monitoring a representative subset of facilities. Not all Bay Area wastewater agencies participated in this study. DSRSD did participate. And the study's focus was to look at PFAS as it travels through the plant. And that's what I mean by fate and transport, using these two PFAS methods. And this is important because in the investigative study, they're only using the targeted method. So here's a graph. This graph shows the median influent, which is PFAS, summation of PFAS coming into the plant, and the effluent, the summation of PFAS leaving in the liquid form. The graph also shows blue bars and a purple bar. The blue bar represents the targeted analysis, the summation of PFAS from that. And the purple bar represents the summation of PFAS using the top assay analysis, which is the broad spectrum method, which looks at PFAS precursors. So what I want you to gather is that levels of PFAS that were detected were greater when using the top assay, that broad spectrum method, than in the targeted method. So we're seeing more PFAS using this method. And the influent levels coming into treatment plants have significant levels of PFAS precursors. And that's important because if we were to just look at the blue bars and the influent of what's coming into the plant and what's leaving the plant, the effluent looks higher. But in reality, there are precursors being transformed in the wastewater treatment process, converting to targeted analytes. And so there was another area to study for phase 2, which was to look at top analysis in the effluent as well, the liquid stream leaving the plant. This is another key takeaway graph. This is an anonymized data amongst a subset of agencies that participated in this study. What I want you to notice is that the bars on the left side of the screen, that's an agency that has a high industrial footprint, industrial user footprint, which means there's permitted industrial users. And then if we look on the right, that's an agency that has mostly residential. And the reason why this is significant is because in some parts of the country, you would expect to see those with high industrial footprints having a very high level of PFAS coming in to the treatment plant. But what we see here is that there is some variation, yes, but for the most part, it's about the same. The other thing to notice is that those different colored bars that make up the bar, those represent different PFAS compounds. And we would call that sort of like a fingerprint or an identity. And you see the distribution of the different PFAS compounds are kind of similar across the different agencies as well. So what this means is that more investigation is merited upstream of what's coming into the influent. We need to target specific industrial users that may be contributors of PFAS to the influent, and also look at the residential flow too. So the takeaway from the phase 1 is that the influent levels had significant levels of PFAS precursors as demonstrated by the top assay. Bay Area agencies had similar PFAS levels and profiles which in their influent, which merits more investigation upstream. So the next steps would be to look at PFAS using the top analysis and the influent, the effluent, and biosolids to see where PFAS is going. And then also to look upstream of the influent into the sewer shed. So in 2023, we completed phase 2 of the study that looked at those different aspects that we were just talking about. And it also included groundwater monitoring for facilities that would have been required via the investigative order to monitor their groundwater. So I'm starting with the phase 1 graph again. You have we don't have the top analysis in this graph, but we do in this one. And this one has the median concentrations of the summation of PFAS, of what's coming into the plant and what's leaving the plant. It also has these bars that represent the max and min levels of what the different agencies' influence showed for the summation. And something you notice is that influent for the top, which is represented by the orange bar, and you look at the effluent for the top, which is represented by the other orange bar, and the influence seems much higher than the effluent. So what could be going on? We know that we're not creating PFAS. Are we destroying? No, we're not. It's going right into the solids. So on average, about half of the mass of the total quantified PFAS contained in influent is partitioned or sent to the solids. So you're seeing that it's traveling around the plant. It's going to these different places that we talked about in the stream. The sewer shed study. What's coming into the plant is on the left side. It's the farthest on the left. The residential flow is right next to it, and then you see the laundry, and you're like, wow, that's a lot of PFAS. So for industrial laundries, there is a high concentration of PFAS, but the flow is very small. So although it can be considered a source, the flow is pretty small. What's of significance is the residential. Yes, the residential median is lower than what's coming into the plant, but that flow represents about 95% of the flow coming into the Bay Area agencies. So residential flow is considered a significant contributor of PFAS to wastewater treatment plants. So there was also a groundwater study that DSRSD participated in. In this groundwater study, it was done according to the investigative order. 3 wells were monitored for PFAS, and 2 wells had detections of PFAS. Based on those sampling results, DSRSD took the next steps, and those next steps are featured in the next presentation. We'll go over that next. So for phase 2, the key takeaways are that wastewater treatment plants are not creating nor destroying PFAS in their treatment process as seen by the top assay. Residential wastewater is a major source of PFAS, and the next steps, there will be a phase 3. It'll happen sometime in 2026. They're going to focus on consumer products with the highest PFAS contribution where legislation is not yet in place, and to look at those fingerprints. And then the next step for us is the study that you'll see in the next presentation. So why are consumer products so important to look at? Remember, we talked about ppms, parts per million versus parts per trillion. Because consumer products, some consumer products, have PFAS in the levels of the parts per million. And just to put it into perspective, concentrations measured in the parts per million are equivalent to 1 million times that of a part per trillion. So there is a big difference, and there is definitely, a reason to be looking into consumer products. And that's why it's really important that we support legislative efforts that limit the flow of PFAS in consumer products. So I just show on the screen a few pieces of legislation that have been passed and are effective that target food packaging, child products, cosmetic products, textile articles, and also there is legislation that has been introduced that prohibits the sale of products where PFAS is intentionally added. So the next steps for DSRSD are to continue to participate in wastewater studies with our regional and state partners, continue to be compliant with all regulations, continue to monitor and advocate for PFAS legislation to remove PFAS from consumer products. And my last takeaway is this lovely picture of an overflowing bathtub. And what I'm trying to convey here is that we need to turn the tap of PFAS off. For as long as PFAS continues to be produced and used in consumer products, PFAS will be present in wastewater. I will now answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. This time I'll start to my left.
Thanks, Christy. Another great presentation. And just actually a couple things. It's more on the methodology. So when you're talking about the top method, I'm just curious, like for analyzing the levels, that actually captures, it's a better way of capturing, right, the quantity of PFAS versus the targeted method, correct? So I guess what I'm just curious is that sort of what the standard is out there, or why would someone use a targeted method, I guess?
Use both, actually. So when you're doing top assay, you'll sample and duplicate, and you'll run the top assay and then run the targeted method as well. And the reason why is because the oxidation process that's used to force the structural change, yes, there is some natural oxidational process that will have transformation of PFAS from those precursor products to those end products, but that one in the lab is a very aggressive oxidation that you wouldn't see in nature, and so it's forcing it, and that's one of the reasons why. But the targeted method is the acceptable method. I think from what I've seen is that the approach is probably going to be a use of broad spectrum method alongside a targeted method. It may not be top. It may be another type of broad spectrum method.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the other, when you mentioned about industrial versus residential, and you were showing that graph where you said, it looked like it was kind of showing similarities between both, when you said the left side versus the right. And I guess, was that control for volume in both instances? I mean, I'm just curious, when you looked at the residential versus the industrial, just wanted to see if that was maybe control for volume when we were looking at PFAS levels, volume of output. Does that make sense, or?
Can you?
Well, I guess what I'm wondering is that, the more, I would imagine the more volume, you have, or I guess the amount that's coming to the plant, if it's less, for example, from the industrial, then would that potentially show a lower amount, or is the concentration going to be the same in either instances?
It depends on the industry, right, and the industrial user and what processes they have in place. So if they have PFAS as part of their manufacturing process, then and they have a high flow, you would suspect there would be a high contribution from that industrial user. But I think the drive home message of this particular for Bay Area water agencies, there may be some industrial impact, but the residential impact is significant and a major source, because we don't have those sorts of industries like back east,
right,
that they have over there.
Okay, great, thank you.
Very good. I'm totally satisfied. That's a lot of good information. I just got to think it through for a while. So, well done. Thank you.
I don't have any questions, but yeah, I'm going to have to mull over some of it because I'm not a scientific person.
Okay. If I could have you flip back to slide 49, this is, and it's more, I'm a visual person. I apologize for doing this.
No, it's okay.
And maybe I should turn on my mic. Sorry, cameras.
It's okay.
All right. So when I look at this, I'm kind of like looking at on the left, the blue, the purple, that's what's coming in, going out is the blue. And I'm really looking at the blue on the right, the effluent is additive. And since the influent doesn't go away, we don't break it down, is it the delta that is that purple converting over? The precursor converting over?
Really good. I'm going to move over here. Yeah. This graph is going to illustrate for you what you want to see is that what we're seeing is some transformation from the influent to the effluent of the precursors, right? And then once you do the top analysis, you realize not all the precursors are present that are in the influent, that are in the effluent. There's something missing. And what's really going on is since that's just when we talk about the effluent, we're just talking about the liquid stream going out, the treated liquid stream. There's still the solids to account for. And then we see that in the solids. We see what's missing captured in those biosolids.
I think on this graphic, my problem is you change the scale on the rightmost graph. And so that.
And also, it's nanograms per gram are a different unit measure. And so that's why I have that little on my second bullet to just say that on average about half of the mass of the total quantified PFAS. So to put it into perspective, because it can be confusing when you're looking at these scales and they change, and then also some of the units change, that half of that's going to the biosolids on average.
And that's what I want for those that view the video, is to notice that exact scale difference, that it is not necessarily a one-to-one visual. And there's more to this science than just that. And so really focusing in, understanding that scale, understanding the key takeaways of what is being explained here today is important. Thank you for that. You can kind of get yourself prepped for the next presentation, and I'll just make this one statement. The one graphics that you did call out, they really showed the different industries. And, you know, when we all think about it, and I sit here, you know, as a board member, but then I also sit amongst everyone that is viewing and those that we serve, is when we talk about PFAS, we look about the industries, we look about what are the major sources, and you hear 95% is coming from the residents.
95% of the flow.
95% of the flow.
95% of the flow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I do want to make sure that we understand that. But the second part is when we all ask what can be done, we have to start at home first, right? What is in our control? And what is it that we can do different? Because we also sit here and say and look, what are the sources, right? It's in your lipstick, it's in your nail polish, it's in your carpet, it's in your clothing, it's in your stain resistance, it's in the list goes on. And I think those are the things that we all have to latch onto. And as we identify with the problem, we have to make sure we understand that. So thank you for your presentation. It was really helpful for me to break down science on a word I can't even pronounce. I apologize to the audience on that, but it really helps simplify it into digestible information that I understand what I am a part of, or what can I be a part of a solution of. So thank you. Back to staff.
Christy. So rounding out our trio of PFAS presentations, I'd like to introduce Pete Leffler, a senior principal hydrogeologist from Ludorf and Scalmanini Consulting Engineers. Following on after the BACWA study in 2023, DSRSD hired this firm to evaluate the potential for DSRSD's wastewater and recycled water operations to contribute to the PFAS footprint detected in the main groundwater basin that was discussed earlier this evening. Pete Leffler will provide an overview of his firm's study and key findings. Thanks.
General Manager Lee, and good evening, President Goel and board members. Appreciate being here tonight. So, yeah, we will discuss tonight a regional hydrogeologic study that we did and some PFAS related sampling work. So the topics we're going to cover after an introduction are going to include what we call the hydrogeologic conceptual model. We will look at some water quality sampling. We will talk a little bit about a groundwater flow model that was developed and a preliminary recycled water analysis. So this study began back in 2023 to look at the potential for wastewater treatment plant operations to contribute to the presence of PFAS in the Livermore Valley groundwater basin. And so the key objectives of this study were to analyze the potential of PFAS detected at the dedicated land disposal facility to migrate off-site, and also to evaluate areas where recycled water is applied for irrigation and compare that to the known PFOS footprint that's been mapped in the main basin by Zone 7. And as has been talked about before, PFOS is one of the many PFAS constituents, and we'll focus on it here as an indicator for the presence of PFAS to be consistent with how Zone 7 has done their mapping. So just as sort of an overview of the basin, this diagram shows the entire Livermore Valley groundwater basin. The areas that are sort of the lighter blue, these are referred to as fringe areas, and we'll talk a little bit about that in upcoming slides, why they're referred to as fringe areas. And then the darker blue is the main basin, and that is where the wells, the municipal wells, are located that have been talked about by Ken in the previous presentation. From Ken's presentation, this PFOS footprint, this one's for the lower aquifer, and the DSRSD facilities are over here in the brown, the light blue, and the orange color here. So to give you some reference to where things are located that we'll be talking about. And so we'll start with the key takeaways from the study, and then we'll come back to some of the details behind those. So the first bullet is the fact that the DSRSD facilities are located about 2 miles to the west of the main basin PFOS footprint, which essentially indicates that the PFOS footprint is moving towards in the general direction of the DSRSD facilities, and therefore meaning that the DSRSD facilities are not contributing to the main footprint just based on their location. Second is, this is sort of a theme that we'll talk about a lot, but the DSRSD facilities and the surrounding area have a superficial, about 50-foot thick clay layer of very low permeability that in some studies is referred to as an aquiclude. And we took a look at the typical groundwater travel times to surface water bodies or channels that we'll talk about a little bit, and off-site locations in groundwater. Those travel times are typically on the order of decades to centuries. The second to last bullet, we found that the detection of PFOS at the DSRSD facilities is confined to a very small and shallow area. And the last bullet on this slide, basically the available evidence indicates no current and minimal potential for future impacts to municipal groundwater supplies in the main basin from DSRSD facilities, and also that the potential contribution to surface water is negligible. And the final couple takeaways, we'll talk about this overlay of parcels that are irrigated with recycled water in comparison to the PFOS footprint in the main basin suggests it's not contributing to that footprint. And then finally, again, the presence of this superficial clay layer is also pretty widespread among the recycled water application areas that helps to restrict movement of constituents. Okay, so now we'll get into some of the details, starting with the hydrogeologic conceptual model. And so our study area was focused up here in the northwest corner of the basin in this outline in red, referred to as the fringe subarea north, and this light blue area here. It's about a 9 square mile area, and we wanted to kind of see what was going on in this area and how that relates to the main basin here in dark blue. And so we'll take a look at a generalized geologic cross-section on the next slide. It's going to extend from north to south and go through the site. And we looked at a lot of the actual geologic, detailed geology cross-sections that have been done in the past in previous studies. And in the next slide, we've tried to generalize it to show the different layers. So provide context for what we'll talk about in following slides. So there's various layers here. In the dark brown, you see the superficial clay layer here, and here's the site kind of in the fringe basin area. So you have the superficial clay layer here. Beneath that is in this orange is what's referred to as the upper aquifer, and that was mentioned in Ken's presentation. And then the next layer down in kind of the salmon color is another clay layer. And then in the fringe area, you have this light blue layer. This is the so-called Tasahara Formation. It's an older geologic formation. It's semi-consolidated, meaning it's kind of more compacted, so it has a much lower permeability. But when you go to the main basin, instead of that, you have this yellow layer, which is the recent alluvium. So this is the coarse grain material, sand and gravel, with clay layers as well. But the sand and gravel layers, that's where the wells are screened that Ken had mentioned, the municipal wells, and that's where pretty much all the water is coming from in the basin. And then there's another layer beneath that that's referred to as a Livermore Formation, again, an older formation. So really, the groundwater is moving primarily in this orange layer and this yellow layer. And these other layers are low permeability layers. So this dark brown layer, this salmon-colored layer, and the blue layer in particular, you don't have much groundwater movement in these layers. Now we're going to zoom in a little more to the site itself and look at the geology a little bit more detail there. So first we'll look at A prime cross section that goes kind of north to south, and then we'll look at B prime that goes from west to east. And so again, the light blue, the facultative sludge lagoons, which I'll refer to as FSL, are here. The DLD is the brown area here. So from north to south, we have this superficial clay layer, referred to as the aquiclude. We have our monitoring wells. There's several monitoring wells on site, some of which are shown here. So they're screened in the shallow zone here. So there's several of these monitoring wells shown here. And then beneath that, we have this upper aquifer, and we have some monitoring wells that are screened there. And here we're showing roughly an FSL. It extends a little bit above ground surface and a little bit below ground surface in terms of depth. And then the DLD here. And then if we look at the west to east cross section, again, the same geologic layers of superficial clay aquiclude and the upper aquifer. Again, our monitoring wells shown here, both in the shallow and in the upper aquifer zone. This dashed line with the little triangles, that's what we call the water table. So that's in that shallow layer. When you drill down, that's where you're going to find the top of the groundwater. And that's important with respect to the other feature shown here is on the west side. So this is offside a little bit, but to the west along 680 is Alamo Canal. And that is incised a certain depth, which goes through this water table. So this means we're going to have potential for surface water groundwater interaction in this channel. And then on the east side, we have this shallow drainage ditch. So it's much shallower, but it's the bottom of that is right, about the same depth as the water table. So we have potential for surface water groundwater interaction there as well. So this figure is a zone 7 figure that shows the extent of that superficial clay layer. And so the site facilities are over here. And so you can see how extensive it is, especially in the western portion of the basin. So it's quite an extensive extent of that superficial clay. And then in terms of the upper aquifer, the groundwater flow directions, so we generally have a north to south flow through our study area here. Again, the DSRSD facilities here, groundwater flow from north to south. The basin so-called outlet is down here in the southwest corner. And then you kind of have a general flow from the main basin that's kind of in this direction towards the west or southwest. Okay, so that's a little bit on the hydrogeology of the area, which gives some context. And so now we'll talk about some water quality results. And so you saw this map before, just so a big picture for PFOS from a Zone 7 map. So this is the upper aquifer, and that's the lower aquifer. And so Ken talked about this a little bit in his presentation. And we just added showed the DSRSD facilities over here, again, relative to the PFOS footprint. And so now we'll talk a little bit about we didn't just sample groundwater, we also sampled surface water because we wanted to look at, that surface water groundwater interaction potential. And so we sampled the Alamo Canal at 4 locations shown in these plus symbols. And in the blue is the PFOS result. And so we had 11, 11, 9, and 10 as we go, and this is in the down gradient direction. So that was for Alamo Canal. And then on the drainage ditch on the east, at the upstream side, we had 38, and down here we had 15. So the takeaway from this is that if the concentrations are higher or the same in the up gradient as they are compared to down gradient, that suggests that there's not a contribution from the site that's causing those concentrations to increase in the down gradient direction. Flipping over to the groundwater side of the sampling results. So there's kind of have to separate the shallow from the deeper layer here. So in terms of the symbols, the black circles are monitoring wells in the shallow clay layer or aquiclude. The red squares are symbols for the upper aquifer that's beneath it. So starting in the shallow zone, we did detect some PFOS in some wells. So in this well right next to the FSLs had the highest value of 280. But it declined very quickly to 2.6 at this location. We had 12 at this location over here to the west, and then we had a non-detect here to the south. So, this indicates that within the shallow zone, while we have some detections, that it's pretty well contained on site. And then we can see in the upper aquifer beneath that, we had 3 samples that were all non-detect. And most importantly, since the flow goes from north to south at the down gradient side here, we have these non-detects indicating there's no PFOS flowing off site in that upper aquifer. And this is just looking at some of those results, but in a cross section for the groundwater quality results. So that 280 value I showed you here is in this well, which is, this is the screen interval here, these cross marks. So showing that it's, right next to the bottom of an FSL. And then, so beneath that in the upper aquifer, we had our non-detects, and then a non-detect to the south as well in the shallow zone. So again, showing that the PFOS is being contained on site. Okay, now we'll switch gears and talk a little bit about a groundwater flow model. And so what we did is within the study area, we looked at a little bit smaller area in this black rectangle here, and this overall study area in red. And again, the DSRSD facility is kind of in the middle of this black rectangle for the model domain. And what we really wanted to look at here is we kind of focused on the FSLs and the relationship to anything that might be migrating out of those FSLs. And so we're representing the surface water channels here. So this is Alamo Canal. This is that eastern drainage ditch. So we wanted to incorporate those features into this modeling effort. And so we wanted to look at the potential migration pathways. So groundwater can flow horizontally or it can flow vertically, and it can flow in different directions. So we really were trying to look at, if any water's coming, out of these FSLs into the subsurface beneath them, where might it go? And so basically it could either go horizontally towards this drainage ditch on the east, or it could go horizontally to this Alamo Canal that's off-site, but over here along 680, or it could go vertically downward to get to the upper aquifer beneath that clay layer, and then it could flow horizontally within that upper aquifer in the southern or down gradient direction. So that's going this way. So those are the 3 main potential migration pathways. So basically what this study found is when we looked at all the available data and developed this model and calibrated it, the estimate was that there was 1.1 acre-feet per year of infiltration beneath the ponds. We talked about the 3 migration pathways. So we tried to look at with the model, well, of this 1.1 acre-feet per year, where does it go in terms of these 3 different pathways? And so we found it to be pretty evenly divided, 0.25, 0.45, and 0.4 acre-feet per year, going in the 3 different directions. And in terms of surface water, if it were to reach these 2 endpoints, the drainage ditch and the Alamo Canal, the rate at which it would be flowing in there is very small, 0.00035 cubic feet per second and 0.0006 cubic feet per second. And relative to the flow that's already in there, I mean, those are very small numbers, multiple orders of magnitude below the flow that's already in there. And we also really wanted to look at the travel times in these geologic layers that we have on site. And we looked at it a couple different ways that we refer to as analytical and numerical. Numerical really meaning the groundwater flow model. And we looked at So the median travel time, so that's kind of like the average from the FSL to the eastern drainage ditch, we had numbers ranging from 27 to 43 years. The travel time to Alamo Canal was much larger because it was quite a bit further away, 465 to 650 years. The pathway to flow vertically downward from the FSL to the upper aquifer ranged from 160 to 240. And then to the extent that anything would get to that upper aquifer, the time to flow off site a certain distance is about 10 to 25 years. So that's an idea of the travel times following these different pathways. So finally, we'll take a look at a preliminary recycled water analysis. And basically, this was just looking at where is recycled water being applied and how does that compare to the location of the PFOS footprint. And so basically, you've seen the footprint before. This is the upper aquifer. And so if we overlay the recycled water parcels, the purple parcels are DSRSD locations. The orange are City of Pleasanton locations. And you can see for this main footprint, there's very little overlap. There's just a very slight overlap here at the very western end of the upper aquifer PFOS footprint. So it doesn't give an indication that recycled water is really contributing to that. It looks more like just that the PFOS footprint has slowly migrated over time in this direction within the upper aquifer. And then if we look at a similar thing with the lower aquifer, a little different shape to the PFOS footprint in the lower aquifer. And again, if we overlay the recycled water parcels on that, again, no overlap with the purple DSRSD parcels and very little overlap with even the City of Pleasanton parcels. So again, just kind of on this very preliminary analysis, it doesn't look like the recycled water parcels are contributing to the main footprint. So I think if we could boil the study down to just two main conclusions, it would be that, the presence of this 50-foot thick plus or minus layer of low permeability clay beneath the DSRC facility and the recycled water sites strongly impedes the movement of constituents, including PFAS patients. And second, that there's no indication based on the available data in the study that DSRSD wastewater recycled water operations have contributed to the main basin footprint. So with that, that's what I had to present today, and happy to answer any questions.
So before we turn it back over to the board for questions and board discussion, I wanted to offer a few final thoughts on the information presented this evening. As the board has heard throughout the evening, PFAS is ubiquitous, it's widespread, it persists in the environment, it's been detected in our groundwater and our wastewater supplies, and it's an issue that the agencies are going to have to deal with in the future. On the drinking water side, Zone 7 is implementing a PFAS management strategy to proactively address the PFAS detected in the groundwater basin and ensure that the drinking water delivered to our customers meets or exceeds all state and federal drinking water standards well ahead of the regulatory requirements. Wastewater treatment facilities, and to that fact, also drinking water treatment plants, are passive receivers of PFAS. We do not create or use PFAS in the treatment process. The district will continue to participate in regional studies to understand the presence of PFAS in wastewater and potential effects on the environment. And the Ludorf and Scalmanini site-specific study that looked at DSRSD facilities shows that our wastewater and recycled water operations are not contributing to the PFAS footprint in the groundwater basin. And whether that's through groundwater flow interaction, surface water groundwater interaction, or application of recycled water. And then finally, the key takeaway from this evening is that As long as PFAS is manufactured and used in consumer products, PFAS will be present in the environment. And for this reason, the district, along with other water and wastewater agencies, are continuing to advocate for legislation to ban PFAS in consumer products.
Thank you, Jen. Bring it to the board. I'll start off with our right side. And then after that, I will make sure to open it up to the public, and then we'll bring it back to the board for any final comments. So starting off with our right side.
I don't have any questions, but I would just like to say that ever since PFAS was discovered and as a problem for human health, it's been very frustrating to have to deal with because we've just spent, Lord, I don't know how much money proving what in my mind we already knew. It's all over. It's coming from the manufacturing sources. I'm pleased that Zone 7 is treating the drinking water so that there's not an additive. I'm glad we've now proven that our wastewater plant has nothing whatsoever to do with it. But it's just not our problem. It belongs with the manufacturers, it belongs with the 3Ms and the DuPonts and whoever. And we've got to support legislation, even in our interesting federal environment, that prohibits the use of it in products.
Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize for being twitchy. My back is in spasms, so it was. It wasn't that I was nervous about what you were talking about. It's been hard for me to sit this long, so I do apologize if my movements were distracting. I did want to ask, since Zone 7 is a strategy of putting in sentinel wells, do we need to consider maybe putting a few additional wells in around or near the creek, perhaps? I mean, even though I appreciate the model and that it's not moving, do we need to gather additional data to demonstrate that? Because there's quite a bit of distance between these two wells, right? So it'll be 15, 20, 30 years before we're sure that it's not moving based on what I was looking at the model. So I guess your opinion on sentinel wells, is that something that would be value added for us, or is that based on the data not something to consider?
Well, there are actually quite a few more wells than I showed you today in terms of results. So we didn't, well, first I would say we didn't sample all the wells.
Okay.
So you have additional wells to work with potentially. I think, we could, beyond that, we could kind of look at that question a little harder if the coverage is sufficient. But, I think the first step is to, would be to see what already exists in terms of some wells that haven't been sampled yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to my left side, starting off with Dr. Govinda Rao.
Thank you again. Another really good, informative presentation. It's also good to hear there's no indication that the DSRSD wastewater and recycled water have contributed to the PFAS footprint. But one of the things I had a question on is just more of a curious question on slide 83, and you don't have to go back to it, but you had mentioned that there was one of the samples that was around 280, but then everywhere around that it was an ND, non-detect. So I'm just curious to see, was that resampled to validate that that sampling to really ensure, was that really the right number, or was it, just kind of curious why that number showed up there, what was why that was that level was kind of higher, but then everywhere else around it there was a non-detect.
Yeah, so I think as was mentioned in Christie's presentation, there were 3 wells that were sampled previously as part of a regional study. That well with the 280 was one of those. And so it did have elevated levels of PFAS, in its original sampling. So we got 2 results that showed elevated levels. I think the fact that it's low or non-detect around it just is an indication that it's not moving very quickly. Yeah. And as you may recall in that cross section, that particular well it's very close. I mean, it's really right on the edge of an FSL. It's kind of even closer than what my cross section showed because there's two wells like right next to each other, and I had to separate them.
Got it.
But it's literally like right next to an FSL, and the screen is, kind of starts right near the bottom of the FSL.
Okay.
So it's like as close as you can get to one of the FSLs. And so I think that's the reason that you see the elevated level there, but not as you move away from it in the other wells.
Great. Thank you.
Dr. Govindarao, if I could just also add that there are legacy uses of that site as well before DSRSD took over operations. So, while we have some data, some of the uses could go back and do go back decades, even again before DSRSD began its operations.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Jen.
I think, it's part of our study was a look at that a little bit, and there were military wastewater treatment plant operations prior to DSRSD going back to the 1940s, which you saw in I think the previous presentation from Ken is when they started manufacturing PFAS. So that facility there's a lot of legacy operations there.
Thank you.
No questions, just a comment. Very clear. Hydrogeology is kind of a black art and tough to understand if you're not trained in it. I think you did a really nice job of actually presenting. The cross sections really helped kind of people visualize it. I mean, I feel as good as I can with this kind of unpleasant situation we're all facing. At least it's looking like we're not causing it. We're part of the problem. I will disagree with Georgina a little bit that it is our problem to solve because they're going to make it our problem to solve, and we can hopefully get some financial relief from the parties that actually caused the problem. And again, like I said after the first presentation, the collaboration is great. Obviously, you and Ken have worked together. I mean, you guys have worked together a lot, I can tell. Keep it up, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Before I make my comments, I'm going to just check for the public. Are there any public comments? Any notes? Bring it back. All right. First of all, from my side, I'd like to say thank you, thank you, thank you. I think this is a significant presentation, and it's one to help the public understand, digest, and then make a choice of what is the real takeaway. I think staff amongst all the agencies that have participated have helped us get to a point where information can be consumable. A couple questions or maybe one comment and then confirmation of that comment. Our placement of our facilities seems to be probably fortunate and on a unique characteristic placement. Is that a misstatement?
No, I mean, geologically, it is a fortuitous placement of the facilities, and I don't know, maybe back a long time ago when all the operations, even the legacy operations started, perhaps they recognized that. But it is fortuitous.
Thank you. And then, you being in the industry, maybe, or anyone else can comment. This kind of model that we've performed here, is this being done anywhere else that we know about?
Well, I would say it's a pretty commonly used tool in our industry, and Zone 7 is doing the whole basin, and they had a model for many years that they're now updating. Mm-hmm. So that's a work in progress that covers the whole basin. What we did in our study was just a very small, obviously, area of the basin and a very site-specific study. But it's a commonly used tool in general. But as far as applying it to other, like, I don't know, similar situations related to PFAS and so forth, I mean, I don't know specifically, but it is commonly used.
Okay, so the model is commonly used, but may not necessarily be in PFAS, PFOS.
Well, it's a commonly used tool for many different aspects of hydrogeology, both even just about groundwater flow, not related to constituents. But I mean, I'm sure there's other studies of PFAS and site specific that are using models as well. But yeah, I couldn't cite any specific examples right now.
And I think the reason why I focus on that is data helps draw conclusions. The more spots we have to collect the data from helps get better analytics. And it helps us understand sooner than later. And a lot of the analytics that was provided here indicate that whatever movement we have currently that we understand is slow, very slow. And I was just kind of thinking about my days from flood control. And I was really thinking about how to look at the flow that you're saying is coming at 0.0006 CFS. And if I recall correctly, and I may be wrong, but the flow inside of Alamo Canal during peak flow is somewhere in the neighborhood, and peak flow, that means the high storm weather that we may have experienced recently, is well above 20,000 CFS at peak flow during a high rain event. So use that as the extremes of bench on the flow of what's really coming out. It's very, very little. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you, staff. Thank you, board. You know, I think us as a board and our partners within the Tri-Valley, we've all come together. Georgine, Director Von Heater Leopold, and Director Halkett have been in our industry for a long time, have seen it, and the partnership goes a long way to even enable us to get to this point. So thank you to everyone that has enabled us to gather this information to help inform our public. With that, we'll move on to our next item unless there's any other comments. Okay, moving on to item 9, reports. 9A, board member items. 9A1, Joint Powers Authority and committee reports. I understand there's none. Okay. 9A2, submittal of written reports for days of service events attended by directors. Written reports are due this evening. Does anyone have anything to report? Director Von Heater Leopold.
Yeah, I attended, first of all, the San Ramon State of the City address along with Director Govindarao and Director Johnson, and of course our general manager. And it was very informative. The new mayor did an excellent job of providing statistics, and you all know how I love all the statistical information about growth and things like that. One of the things that really surprised me is that their current population is 84,000. As you know, Dublin's came up to 72,000, but it's interesting to see they've grown faster than we did, and we always get blamed for growing so fast, but it was an excellent presentation. The average home cost, just for information, is $1.6 million. Tells us we've come so far. The other thing I went to, or two other things, is I attended the mayor's conversation from the Tri-Valley Nonprofit Alliance. That was a very informative luncheon also. It was actually a meeting. It wasn't a luncheon, excuse me. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. And Mayor Marchand made a comment that has really resonated with me that I hadn't thought about before in trying to support nonprofits and their role in our society. He pointed out that cities provide services to the voter, the worker, the more involved people in our community, whereas nonprofits provide services to the less advantaged, to everybody else that doesn't participate in voting or coming to a meeting or working. And I hadn't thought about it in that way before, but I actually said something to him the next day at LAFCO because he and I haven't always agreed on things, and it was kind of interesting to see. I was really cheering him on because that was a good point. But it was very interesting in that so many of them, as we all know, are losing funding, and it's probably going to be up to the cities with even less money to step up and provide these services. And so this nonprofit alliance that's formed in the Tri Valley is really great, because you've all heard me say many times that both San Ramon and Dublin were built by nonprofits, were built by volunteers in the old days. And we've got to keep them going. We've got to volunteer. We've got to be involved. We've got to keep them going, because our cities are not going to be able to provide those services. So if you have time, volunteer. And then the last one I went to was last Thursday night, was the Alameda County Special Districts Association annual dinner, at which our speaker was Brian Copeland. I remembered the name, but had not really thought about the context of what it was in. He's a writer. He's been on our local television for years. He was very interesting, but he was afraid of stepping on toes. So instead of talking about some specifics, he took questions from the audience and answered their questions, rather. But the other thing is, for the extra money, you heard me talk before how much more expensive this year's dinner was. But the difference between Thursday night's dinner and Friday night's dinner was like a million miles apart. The dinner that we got at the place in Castro Valley, I've lost the name, the Willow, anyway, was excellent. So all three events were full of information for me, and I really enjoyed it. Any of you that got to go along to any of those, it was very informative, all of them. That's all.
I just wanted to add one quick thing, having attended the State of the City in San Ramon, obviously, which is the area that I represent. I'm recalling that Mayor Hudson, the prior mayor, had spoke about how the sales tax was too low. San Ramon was the lowest of the Tri-Valley, and then they put on an initiative, and now it's an additional cent. And hearing the current mayor talk about how they were going to spend all that money made me really think about everything's rolling downhill. And whatever we can do to be creative to protect our ratepayers, they will be grateful for. Because it does seem like a lot of costs are being passed on. PG&E rates are going up. Sales tax is going up. Can't buy a dozen eggs for less than $7. It just made me really think about the service that we provide and the value that we provide by counting those dollars and thinking about how we're spending things on research or not, and addressing the right problems. So it really helped me put that in perspective. So, did you want to add anything on the State of the City?
Yeah, I mean, no, thank you. Great. It was a great presentation, and just a couple things. And I like statistics as well, as Director Von Heater Leopold does. And I just thought this would kind of blow everyone's mind. And I don't know how they track this, but there was they mentioned that when they talked a little bit about just like the demographics and stuff, but they also talked about what the city takes care of. And one of the numbers they threw out was 440,000 plus irrigation heads. And we were all, I think we were all sitting at the same table looking, well, how do they count that? But anyways, that was quite an interesting statistic there. But it was also interesting too, like just like we have 6 goals, they also had 6 goals. I think Jan pointed that out to me. But to add on, on the Measure N that was passed, it was passed by 56.21%, and it's going to start effective on April 1st. So that's the 1% increase in sales tax. They do have a budget shortfall of 17.6 million. They're thinking that this will be estimated to generate about 15.2 million. So that's kind of what they're estimating. And just a few other things here to discuss, or just to mention. They got a retail theft prevention grant, which was in the amount of 5.6 million to help with some of the stuff that's been going on there in San Ramon. Behavioral health initiatives that they talked about, partnering with the county A3, also the Iron Horse Trail, the Bollinger Canyon Bridge, the overcrossing should be completed, or it's projected to be completed at the end of the summer of 2025. And then they're looking right now at designing the Crow Canyon overcrossing, on the Crow Canyon Road for continuation of the Iron Horse Trail there. And then also mentioned about the Belmont Village, which is a senior living center, beautiful state of the art. So, I haven't visited yet, but if I heard it's an amazing facility, so you get a chance, not suggesting anyone go live there, but just to go look at it. I heard it's, it's a great, heard it's a great facility.
Anything from your side?
Oh, just the St. Patrick's Day parade was well attended on Saturday. I wanted to shout out to Erin and her staff, and I know that a bunch of other people helped out to pull it off. The staff did a great job. I can't name them all. We showed well. The dogs behaved until the very end, so it was a good time, and I think we showed the district in a very good light. We even got some cheers.
Yeah, we actually got a couple of
We
cheers.
got some cheers from the water people. Yeah, it's like, oh, the water guys, and then, yeah, it was good. Makes you feel good. So, well done. Thank you for pulling that off.
Well, we can't forget Oscar 2.0 showed up
Oh,
in
yeah.
full spirit. I mean, Oscar 2.0 really brought
Yeah.
on 2.0. So thank you to the entire team that made that happen and made our organization really show up in a good light. Moving on to item 9.83. This is your time to request any new agenda items be placed on a future board or committee agenda. Do we have any items? Seeing none. Moving on to item 9B, staff report.
Yes, so first up, I'd like to put a plug in for Zone 7's ribbon cutting event for the Chain of Lakes PFAS facility, which is on Wednesday, March 26th, and all of the board members should have received an evite by way of your email. So if you haven't checked your email, maybe give it a look. The Pleasanton State of the City is on Tuesday, the 25th, going back one day. A couple of you are signed up. The 27th is the Contra Costa Special Districts Association dinner, and the Pleasanton Liaison Committee meeting is scheduled for Monday, March 31st.
With that, this meeting is adjourned at 8:07 p.m. Have a great evening.
Thank you.